Sahana bhavatu, sahano bhunaktu, saha viryam karavavai, tejasvinavaditam astu ma vidvishavai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy and vigor. May our study be illumined. Let us not unnecessarily argue, cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace beyond all. So there are two things happening here. One is Vedanta Series question answer. And if you have questions, hopefully there are answers. And is also having tea with the Swami. So I hope you have tea sitting with you or something of that nature. So I'm going to mute my microphone so that you can formulate your questions.
Namaste, Swami. Good morning, everybody.
Namaste.
A dear friend asked a question the other day, so I'll ask the question on that person's behalf. How can we know that we are making progress in terms of our spiritual growth?
Okay. Well, I can give you a short answer or a long answer. The short answer is when desires decrease. When you notice that desires, but what do we mean by desires? That has to be explained. And that decrease in desires and increase in progress will be self-evident. So the word desires is a general term because it covers many, many things. There are some subtleties to it. Normally, when we think of desires, we think there are external objects and the energy of consciousness is flowing towards those objects and they're giving us some pain. Not normally registered immediately. Immediately registered as something that will deliver pleasure to us. We are built biologically to go toward pleasure. Just as every animal really moves toward it, because if it wasn't pleasurable to eat, then we would starve. So that certain category or certain specialness of a desire in terms of eating is very specific to the human and specific to every species. Otherwise, we'd all be on very different diets. Then there is internally always a great desire, a legitimate desire to move toward perfection. We want to also, in that fullness, be happy to the maximum. We want unending joy, we want power, we want all of these things. And we can see it on the physical level in the external world as things that will satisfy the senses. But we are more than just the physical. So internal to that will be the emotional, the psychological. And when we operate in a field where there are other people, where there are social conditions, we also want to be liked. We want to respond to others. This is why we study the Enneagram, because each one of the personality types will have a corresponding desire associated with supporting their own self-image. And it is a desire that is away from something else. It is a fear. For example, I want to be liked. I fear I will not be liked. I want to be accepted. I fear I will be rejected. So these are also in the category of desires. We can describe it as a kind of feeling, internal hollow within me, a kind of internal lack of fullness, a gap. And I feel I can fulfill it from the outside. Our difficulty is the orientation toward the outside, because we never get fulfilled in this way. As soon as we realize this in principle, and as soon as the taste for the external desires becomes less, and as soon as we feel there are no gaps in me to fill, then we have made progress. Now, the repercussions of not fulfilling desires psychologically is well known and presented to us in the Bhagavad Gita, that actually anger is the result of thwarted desires. And anger also is a generic term that covers a whole wide range of emotions, from mild frustration to hankering to disappointment to outright outburst. And that gives us a difficult view of the world. And all of this is a response to an inaccurate reading of what is there in front of us. And what is there in front of us is not just the external world that we're experiencing. What is in front of us is the human mind, the human body, and the external world in association with that. I always draw a kind of circle, divide it in two, and in one half I put a skeletal man, and divide that into B, body, and C, let's say mind or consciousness, that we mistakenly call my mind. And then our whole operation is to ensure at all costs that this body-mind survives. And to do that, we have to fight a battle, as it were. We have to accept certain things and respond to certain things in the external world. And the external world comprises the social world of other people. Some are nice and some are not. Some are hostile to us and some are friendly. And then also to see that there are events. Events often cannot be controlled. If you ask me, why did people die in a tragedy, or why were they victim to a war, or why are they refugees? There are three possible causes. The one cause will be their own way of thinking. This is a very primary cause that ensures that we have the environment that we have, for good or bad. Because thought moves faster than a sunbeam. The power of thought is inestimable. It works quicker than a photon. And as soon as a thought arrives in our field of awareness, and the thought often comes, if it comes from an unconscious bank balance, a kind of habit level that we have built up all along. And if we don't control this, if we don't make sure that these impressions in the unconscious mind are rendered ineffective, like a seed which has been roasted and you put it in the ground, it can't grow. That's Ramakrishna's example. So we can only do it through the conscious mind. And the conscious mind works when we apply it in terms of namarupa. That means a name and form. And so because everything that we think of is in words, concepts and thoughts and emotions have to go together. We express it in words. And when we change our language, when we shift our linguistics and shift our view, shift our way of thinking, when we shift our understanding of the world and our relationship to it. So supposing we read the world as a creator, then the Supreme that rescues us and that we can interact with and where we can elevate the mind becomes a creator to us. And if you think that this world is a playground, then that supreme fullness, that ideal, becomes a player, something like a dancer or a poet. That gives us a different idea completely of the world. And if you think that this world is a protected field, then that supreme ideal becomes a protector. In whichever way we think of it, we have to play a kind of game where we know at any given time what is going on in the mental field. If you ask what is progress, the first question before you ask that is, where am I now? What is my current status? And when we identify what the current status is, and how do we measure whether it's good or bad, we measure it by virtue of our reactions. How do we react to the world? Do we have a steadiness of mind? Do we react evenly to all the circumstances, be they hot or cold or good or bad, be it praise or blame? And it's not that easy. It's not that easy because the habit level tells us what our first reaction is. So if you recall, I'm keen to lay out these 4 or 5 R's. I think it's 4 of them. So the first R is reaction, nothing you can do about it. Now, supposing you simply react and leave it there and say, that's my nature, and resign from the whole business, and don't exercise your will in controlling this, then unfortunately, not only are you not making progress, but you could be regressing also. So, how am I assessing the world? How do I view the world? And therefore, how will I react to circumstances? And the initial reaction, very often, most times, you can't do anything about it. But you can notice it. And when you notice it, you can evaluate it. And when you evaluate it, you can use this corridor of time, this conveyor belt of time that comes in seconds and minutes, minutes to do with activities and seconds to do with thought. And you can mobilize and harness time. We all experience time. Some scientists say time does not exist. That's not really helpful to us because our experience is we live in a series of passing events. We know what happened in the past, and we know there'll be a future, and we know there is a present moment, which simply glides into the past as quickly as we have thought it. And one important thing, we cannot change it. And if your relationship with the world is, let me forever dig up these past events and ruminate on them and chew the cud of resentment, then that becomes your present state of mind that affects your body, affects every cell of the body, but you're also sowing the seed for a future circumstance. If you hate, you will be hated. If you love, you'll be loved. It's a very simple formula. Love your neighbor as yourself. Well, Jesus said it, but he never said why. And the why of it is because there is only yourself available. What you have categorized as all these divisions, all these individualities, is actually one unit. That's why I call it universe. It's one of it. And when we set up a relationship, we have to have a penetrating vision based on fundamental scripture and philosophy, which says, actually, you thought the world was like this, but actually, when you look at it closely, it's like that. Like looking at a picture, a screen, a television screen, and you're examining pixels and trying to work out because your vision is narrow. Supposing you have vision only to see 1 or 2 or 3 pixels, some kind of constraint, some glasses that will only show that much. And you try and work out, what do these squares mean? They're different colors, they're different shapes, and there's movement within them. And what is one relationship to another pixel? How do they fit together? This microscopic vision will not help us. So we have to go backwards, as it were. We have to broaden our vision and then assess what is the more and more of the totality. And when we see more and more, until we ultimately see everything. And that is also evidence of progress. When our vision broadens, and because of that breadth of vision, our reaction then becomes very different. We are able to face the world in a calm way, something like a game of tennis. Keeping the Lord as your scorekeeper. Come on, what's the score? And knowing that the Lord is omnipresent everywhere and is the only existence and is the supreme teacher, we can adventurously stand in the court knowing that we're not so good at tennis, but we're willing to learn. This game of life is not easy, but we're willing to learn. And the game itself, and the author of the game, and the player in the game, all of this is there for us to learn how to play the game. On the one side is the eternal, on the other side is the Leela, the play. This is Ramakrishna's evaluation. of the totality, that one side is the eternal. It never changes. It's not subject, or it's not an aggregate to parts. It's not assembled. It's not an object. You can't see it. You can't put it in a test tube. You can't see if it's acid or it's alkaline. You can't lick it. So immune to all the senses, but that is within all the sense organs. That is the inner controller, the eye of the eye, the ear of the ear. When this scripture-based understanding becomes understood in principle, then we have to undergo the practice based on our investment in a hollow world, our investment in a house of cards. And so we then, having realized that and understood that in principle, we now have to experience the reality of it. And that is done through introspection. Introspection, not necessarily within you, but we have to have a penetrating insight into the scenes in front of us and evaluate them very differently. And in short, we have to see the Lord of the universe or the Mother of the universe in all things, in everything, not just the surface. The surface, the behavioral surface is there. Our own behavioral surface is there. We can't blame somebody else for having a behavioral surface because we don't like it. It's just a wave. And the unity of existence is there, and whatever we think, and whatever we speak, and however we behave, whatever the hand does, whatever the heart expresses, and whatever the mind issues, all has a resonance in the world in front of us. It becomes the world in front of us. It condenses as all the scenes in front of us. We are continuously manufacturing our own scenarios and then probably complaining about them. Well, what is the problem? We have to shift our way of thinking. We have to shift our understanding. So the first thing is the reaction and to assess it. Oh, there it is. It's an old friend. And sometimes those reactions come from when I was 3 or 4 or 5. Somebody sold my watch or took my toy or something like that. In the Holy Mother, when she was married, is really engaged, she was only 5. And jewelry was lent to her. And then it had to be, while she was sleeping, taken back. She was so distraught. So where are all these things? And nobody could console her. So these are things that are natural to us when we are 5, but not when we're 50 or 150. And if we don't learn this lesson, the older we get, the more entrenched our bitterness becomes, and the more entrenched our negative habits are in the habit level or on the habit level. So how to change it? First of all, understand the principles. And secondly, the practice. What is the practice? The practice is this constant sense of the world is not this. And I see now what the world is. And it is only what religion calls God. It is only the infinite invisible. First we see it inside someone. Then we see it flowing through someone. Then we find it, oh, it's as someone. And then what is the surface ruffles that we're complaining about or disturbed by? These are just the drama. These are just the outfit that is put on, the disguise. At this time of year, in Dublin and other capital cities of the world, you'll find people dressed up as Santa Claus. I know it's a shock for many of you. But is it really the entity it's purporting to be? Or is it somebody dressed up in this way? So we all are walking around disguised as humans, not registering our own divinity and the divinity everywhere. If it's true in us, it's true everywhere. So to recognize that, to recognize it in all actions, makes for a progression. And I'm glad you said progression, because you won't get that instantaneously. Having understood what the reaction is to a circumstance, the next thing we can do is possibly we can understand, where it came from and have a bit of fun. When you are faced as an experienced tennis player with the ball being hurled at you, then you might have a reaction of ducking, or you might have the action of wincing, or you might try and hit it, not estimating properly and missing it. Until you know, oh, the Lord Himself is the one who's throwing this. It's His game. Let me play a loving game with Him. And although I will probably have all these reactions again, I will learn, oh, I can actually return this. I can step in a certain direction, step back, give enough space, try to observe where this ball is landing, try to find out or assess what is its speed and where will it land, and then what I'm supposed to do and position myself in order to appropriately hit it back. And then I'm going to learn how to hit it back in such a way the opponent will have a difficulty. Now we are playing this game like that, and every day is a progression, but it is only a progression when our spiritual life becomes marginally intensified every day. Not only having this view of the world, but also in our spiritual life, sitting down regularly every morning, every evening, at least that much as 5 times a day if necessary. And if you have a guru, a competent teacher, practicing all the instructions from that teacher, sitting down, following that, getting into a meditative state, using the protective thought, which is extremely powerful, the potency of a mantra given by a teacher, and taking your time over it and following that until you have a settlement of mind that leads you to some kind of revelation. The revelation may be for a second. The revelation may be for 2, 3 seconds. It might be for a minute. It might be for an hour. It might be, if you're really lucky, for a few hours. And if you're really, really lucky, then you might be for a day or so. I'm not sure if that's lucky, because how will you operate in those circumstances? So there's a coordination between the inner and outer worlds that has to be adjusted and tuned. With the outer world, we have to see the divine self in all things. Things meaning scenes, places, items within that, what we largely call nature, and people and situations. When we see that as a kind of game, a kind of play, and furthermore, an opportunity for adoration, seeing that in everyone, that is the internal way of viewing it. And when we are by ourselves, seeing the Lord within us, that culminates in a recognition, I am that. I am that pure being. When walking around and working and so on, we cannot say it. We cannot say, I am God, because we don't mean it. Because when we're operating, we're not thinking in this way. We're only asserting something that we are not relating to. Only in meditation can you get that understanding. You can assert it, of course, and that also can have no meaning. But that experience where there's a suspension of everything, even the breath, and an internal rapture is there along with it, where everything rises up. That, at that moment, it is called meditation. And the effect of that will be the absence ultimately of time and space, the absence of any of these cognitions. And that is different from a sleep condition. It is a condition of full illumination. It's a condition of samadhi, as we call it. 2 types of samadhi being there. One where we recognize this fullness, this infinite light, as it were. And on the other hand, we see all the other things behind it. And there's a small curtain, a veil, of which prevents us from a full vision. And that, then we can say we have seen God. And then even the veil falls away and we say, I'm that, I'm that. So this is the process and the progress. But one caution, when you sit for meditation, don't think of progress. When you sit for meditation, you have to tune into the now. That is the same also in every other circumstances as well. That if you're thinking that is like a career path, I'm here and I want to be there, and here's my strategy to get there, you're missing the key component in the development, namely that in Joe Goldsmith's language, a song of gratitude that God is here, God is now, God is love. We miss that. As soon as we become future orientated, we miss it. As soon as we become past orientated, we miss it. As soon as we become doubtful and fearful, we miss it. As soon as we become anxious, we miss it. The glory is here. So to tune in, the art of tuning in to the glory of the self, this is the spiritual path. This is the spiritual endeavor. This is called spirituality. And so when I'm constantly doing that and bring myself back to it, then I know I'm progressing. And then you see, having evaluated reactions properly, we can then revalue them. And in the revaluation, we have to understand there's nothing else in this whole universe except what we call God. And this universe is seemingly fragmented version of it, fragmented through the mind. If we elevate the mind constantly and continuously and do it habitually, not just when we're in trouble. Many people, most people, pray if they believe in a God or some higher power. Many people will do that if they're in severe trouble. If all resources are exhausted, in desperation, they'll turn in this direction. And then there'll be some who are okay, but they want a little more. That's the source of that connection. And then some want more knowledge. But ultimately, those who tune in to the glory of the self or the glory of God constantly, they don't want anything from it. They don't think in the language of progression. The glory is right here and now. You have to just see it here and now. So if you close the windows and close your shutters and ask, what happened to the sun? Where is the daylight? Well, please open the shutters and you'll see. There's the daylight. If you close your eyes and say, well, where is the world? Well, please open your eyes. And then if you complain that the world is tough, then put on tough shoes. If there are thorns on the road, put tough shoes on. Don't complain about it. I'm not sure if it's an Irish saying, you can correct me, that says, it is better to light a candle than curse the dark. Is it an Irish saying? Somehow I have the impression it's an Irish saying. I've heard it here in Ireland. Anyway, regardless, that's a very profound saying and statement. It tells us how to practically deal with life and move on and get on. And the past will never come back, ever. And you may say the past comes back to haunt me. Well, that's because you yourself are voluntarily bringing it back. Maybe habitually you're doing it. And then you see what hasn't arrived is not a reality. The reality that you produce in the future is what you insert here and what you insert now. So make sure that you play the game of artfully tuning your attention into the glory of the divine. And that's what we need to do. And when we've done that habitually, we don't have to worry or even ask the question about progression. It is more to do with an understanding from yourself of your own condition and how you feel. And people will of course notice it, you see. But it's so subtle. We are so attached to our sense of agency. We're so attached to the body-mind complex, the prophet-actor complex, that when we do progress a little bit, and somebody says, "Oh, I noticed a change in you," or even as a Swami or a yogi or something, "Oh, you are so holy," they be careful, because the egoism is very strong, and the temptation would be to say, "Oh yes, I am." It's like saying, "I'm humble and proud of it." It's a contradiction in terms. So I hope I answered your question.
Market Swami.
Good.
I have a question actually.
Yes. Yes.
Actually, Swami Vivekananda said, has regarded mother is the highest one. A mother who gives birth is she loves the most. He said that, right? He said something. He regarded mothers as the highest in the whatever, but what I have question is, um two generations back, if we take, like women were giving birth, they were becoming mother, but you know but they used to torture other women, uh, um, uh, other women, very very, like it was very common, like almost 100% of mother-in-laws were torturing their daughter-in-law. So how this mother became highest in India? Like, I never understand that.
Well, okay. Let's take away the idea of the motherhood and all of that, and put just the general value. The highest possible virtue we could ever have is love.
Yes.
And the world is devoid of it. And so just the word of mother does not guarantee that. Or being a mother doesn't guarantee that you'll be motherly and that you'll have that kind of love. Because you see, every creature will have genetic love. A dog will have it for its puppies. It won't have it necessarily for any other creature or even any other family of dogs. So genetic love, that's easy. We can all have genetic love. We can all love our own. Now, when we expand this idea of love and make it universal love, instead of having mother-in-law, you have mother-in-love. Supposing that transformation takes place, then it is taking the highest value, the highest ideal of love. The highest human ideal that we have, really, would be that self-sacrificing, nurturing love of a mother. That is why it's emphasized in this day and age, for two reasons. Firstly, because who can exceed the love of a mother? Is self-sacrificing, in the genetic love of a mother. It's the example of it. And secondly, um, the the era in which we have been living and it's a culmination of centuries and centuries and centuries, is the degradation of women throughout the world. In Zimbabwe, when we used to raise funds or give funds away for bursaries for students, we made it a policy in line with United Nations policy to give the bursaries to young girls or women. In India, there is still a gap, an educational gap between boys and girls. And so it's an example of having a beautiful, beautiful principle. Mother India, having the beautiful example of Sita, having the concept of a goddess that has survived. Survived meaning every culture, every religious culture historically had a goddess. But largely that's been left, and in India it survived. In India, it not only survived, but it thrived, so that when it comes to the autumn season, there are specific periods, as you know, dedicated to mother's worship, Durga Puja and so on, specific, highlighting this fact. That's one thing. But then culture has to catch up to it. Instead of having a mother-in-law, you have to have a mother-in-love, because that motherliness is not there. So that kind of motherliness is not the highest ideal, because it's not motherliness. It's not being a mother. It's just descending to the biological level of genetic love. And even animals will have it. They'll bark and bite and scratch and oppose any other dog or any other creature that is not its own. They'll fight to the absolute death. But the humans have a very different capacity. Human evolution has brought us to a point where we do have the capacity for God Himself to jump out. So we have jumped out from the brutes. Our story of human evolution is that from monkeys we emerged, and now from us God can emerge. And since love is the highest value, we have to have as broad a love as we possibly can. Now, yesterday, of course, we were doing a public celebration for the birth of Holy Mother Sharda Devi. Her actual Titi Puja will be on Thursday, 15th. But we're celebrating it early because there's a complication of the next weekend where Christmas carols are there and so on. And so obviously we're all thinking of the mother and how she was the example. Supposing we leave all the other examples of motherhood and take Sharda Devi as the supreme example of motherhood, then we have a great, great ideal. On the one hand, we can feel protected and loved. On the other hand, we can see how self-sacrificing that love is. I gave a talk last evening, on Holy Mother, and I could not cover a sufficient ground because there's so much to say about her, even though chronologically, historically, we know very little. And so the last 30 years of her life divided into three kinds of segments. But one segment is like this. When her master passed away, he left a kind of pension. The temple authorities were to pay her a stipend for her maintenance. And he had made a house or hut for her in his own native place, Kamarapuka. And so, unfortunately, temple authorities were told, no, don't worry, devotees are looking after Holy Mother. And so that stipend stopped. And after the Holy Mother had finished all her pilgrimages and so on, she went back to Karmapuka, as were her husband's instructions, and stayed there, living a simple life on rice and spinach that you can grow in your garden. But there's a house for you. There's shelter for you. You don't have to beg for shelter. It's there, absolutely there. And temple authorities are giving it to you. But since people said, oh, devotees are looking after Holy Mother, the temple authorities stopped their pension. Now, for the first month in Karmapuka, the Holy Mother was accompanied by Yogin, that is Swami Yogananda, he became like that, and who she gave a mantra to, and Golap Ma, who had a very dominant personality. Nobody could mess with her. And Karmapuka was a very orthodox village, and a widow living there would have a very, very, very hard time, because women who were widows were abused. They had to shave their hair. They had to wear plain white cloth, no decoration whatsoever. They could not remarry at all in any way. And often they had to serve the community or serve others. Something like they were relegated to the condition of a maidservant. And all these people, these Orthodox people, were kept at bay by the personality of Golap Ma, but she moved on. And Yogin went to join the Baranagar monastic brothers. So she's left there alone and in dire poverty and under criticism. And she had this instruction from Sri Ramakrishna. Please keep your border on, don't shave your head, and also keep your bangles on. That was his absolute instruction. And she came under severe fire until the local people consulted a wise woman who was versed in Vaishnava Tantra system. And she pronounced, no, these are special people. The Holy Mother and Sri Ramakrishna, these are divine expressions of consciousness, pure consciousness. Is like Shiva and Shakti. And so she is Lakshmi. And as a sideline, we can say, and I think I said it last night, she wears the white cloth indicating Saraswati and the bangles indicating Lakshmi. And we know that she wasn't mild-mannered, she was very shy, but often, or no, sometimes, on rare occasions, Kali also came out. And this is how the master would have viewed her, as no different from the mother who was residing in the temple. So we have here the embodiment of motherhood, and we can't say it was accidental. We can say that it is all well designed, that Ramakrishna should be priest at the Mother Kali temple, that Ramakrishna should have as his first teacher Bhairavi Brahmani, that Ramakrishna would have learned from a woman teacher as his first teacher, and that everybody would be calling her mother. That he worshipped her on the Shodashi Puja and submitted all the fruit of his sadhana, 12-year sadhana, to her on that occasion, and worshipped her as a divine goddess, and always treated her as such, with such remarks. If he casually made a comment, not thinking, not knowing it was her, he would say, please apologize or smooth things over, because you can insult me and that's okay. But her, no one can stop. No one can stop the power that she has. And then when she was doing her ministry as a motherly teacher, we can see the example of a world mother, universal mother. And so this is the wonderful ideal that has been presented to us as a universal loving mother who accepts everybody regardless of religion, regardless of caste, regardless of creed, regardless of orthodoxy. She was a thoroughly modern woman, defying conventions. And Sister Nivedita is presented to her, a foreigner, regarded by the Orthodox people in a very derogatory way. And she not only accepts her and talks to her, but calls her my child. And Sister Nivedita so tenderly regards her as my mother. Such universal love that asks nothing in return, is only just giving, prepared to sacrifice her own physical health in looking after her immediate difficult family, but the wider universal family, is, I think, unparalleled. And so it is there as an extremely high ideal, particularly for modern society, that requires this highest ideal of love. And secondly, this upliftment of women. And in the land that's promoting it, I hope it happens in reality.
Thank you, Swamiji. It was really wonderful. Thank you.
Well, we have time for another question.
Swami, I actually, now that you were saying culturally regarding the question, I realized, well, I used to think, oh, culture, nationality doesn't mean as much, because my view is no one deserves more than anyone just because they have given a title. So I take everyone the same. But I realized actually the last couple of days I've been struggling, because I realized that actually nationality seems to be something quite deep internally for some reason, and I realized that there is something in me that actually goes against that. And I mean, I haven't seen this before, and I don't really know how to manage it. But I went into a conclusion that there is something in there that is important to us, deep, maybe in a soul level, which I remember once you said having like that kind of link into somewhere gives you strength. So yeah, so that's the question. What's the importance of actually feeling a national of somewhere or having a nationality?
Okay, so I suppose there's a reason for everything. I suppose there's a reason why you are born in a certain geographic location, in a certain period of historical time, and speaking a certain language with a certain set of parents, the environment that is there. Now, what we certainly would understand is nothing is an accident, and you're exactly in the right place, exactly in the right time, with exactly the right resources, and with exactly the right DNA and exactly the right fingerprints there where you can contribute toward humanity in a unique way, in a special way, because nobody ever saw those fingerprints before you were born, and they'll never see them once you die, and that's your uniqueness, and your DNA is your internal cellular fingerprint. It reminds me of a conversation that went on with one of the Shankaracharyas, and there was a Christian man who went and said, I want to be converted to Hinduism, please. And the Shankaracharya so wisely has a conversation. He says, that's not possible. Because you see, why? Because you cannot convert to a religion of which you are already a member. You are already a Hindu, whether you know it or not. Because of the universality of Hinduism, you don't take converts, and besides, it's an impossibility. You know, it's like saying, I want to be a human. Well, you're already a human. So, after a long conversation, the Christian gets persuaded to go back to his Christian community and find an appropriate saint or a realized person within the Christianity that he can learn from, who can be a mentor, a spiritual confessor, a director, a teacher. And the person was surprised. His final comments were something like this: I expected to come here and be converted, and now you're sending me back to my own religion. And part of the argument was, do you think that God made a mistake making you a Christian? Do you think God made a mistake for you to be born in Spain or reside in UK or wherever? I don't think God is a very bad investor, and I think God is wise enough to put us where we are for our growth. And this is linked into the first question, because progression only occurs from growth. And growth is not an enforced thing. Growth is a cultivated thing. We cultivate the right conditions. You can't make a plant a plant. You can't say that a rose flower should be an oak tree. The internal design is not made like that. It is unique. It is a specific species, and we have to have all of these species. Now, should we then be radically proud of our nationality? Well, I would rather say it's good to be thankful for it and to recognize the advantage of such a situation, and for us then to use it properly. I'm told that more or less everybody in the world, and certainly in the United States of America, wish to be Irish. And you can see this, president after president is very careful to try and find some kind of genetic lineage that's going on in Ireland, even Obama. So there is that, okay, but do we have an ideal? When we think of a country, where we make a judgment on it, and part of the judgment is, would I be happy living there or not? Let's take, for example, Iceland. Iceland, I'm told, is a beautiful country. I've never been there, but Iceland, I'm told, is a beautiful country. But how many people would want to withstand the weather in Iceland? It would be up to an individual choice. So the nationality, we take it as a gift. Our parents, we take it as a gift. We take it that we are fulfilling the wishes of all our ancestors, either side of the XY chromosomes, all our ancestors, and we're thanking them for bringing us to a condition where we now can have full illumination and freedom. With the equipment that we have, we can do it. And that's the important thing. But you see, you might also argue, well, Swami Vivekananda was so proud of his nationality. Well, you see, he was proud of the land that produced these rishis, these mystics, this profound orientation toward a direction for discovering your own inner spirit. And that's what he was proud of. And on the other side, his heart was torn with his fellow beings, his fellow country beings who he understood in dire degradation, poverty, ignorance, and the result essentially of circumstances where one people dominate another and so on. So there's an element of justice that goes within that as well.
Thank you, Swami.
Swami Vivekananda thought that every country, that's why he mentions Celtic blood. It's one of the reasons he feels that every country has its own genetic coding, as it were. And so he was able to pick up, the merits of England. He was able to pick up the merits of America with its democracy. He was able to pick up different characteristics. His own comment with regard to India is the spirituality is in their blood. And it should be shared with the world, and that's our mission, is to share these principles and practices of freedom, where everybody has the highest service to humanity to show people's inner freedom. You can show people, you can give people education, that's also very important. And you should try and uplift people, that's very important. You should try to save a life if the occasion arises, that's important. But all of this, you see, is all within the relative world. And the highest thing for a person to do is to say, hey, did you know that you are already free? And here's how to understand it. You seem to be in a prison, but the bars are illusory, and you can walk out anytime and walk in anytime. It's up to you. One of the participants sent me a dialogue between him and a Catholic priest, and over Swami Vivekananda's Christ the Messenger. And it was a personal take on a personal understanding of Christ, a personal understanding of Christ's message. And of course, there are difficulties within it because there are no theological considerations. And so when we put in theological considerations, two other things come in. Exclusivism comes in, and exclusivism is the exact opposite of love and generosity. And when we talk today of this interfaith dialogue and how we should all be talking together and appreciating each other, and from the 1960s, the Vatican Council II gave this extraordinary document, Nostre Aetate, which essentially put aside any notion of absolute exclusivism, but reserved the right to be the best among equals. In other words, to have the fullness of truth contained in one particular area, and that is bordering on kind of exclusivism and inclusivism. And so we need a broader understanding to things. For example, if you are a scholar and you are studying the Christian biblical texts and Christianity and early Christianity, what will your opinion be of a virgin birth? And you may well say, from a historical point of view, from an academic point of view, we cannot hold with it. From a theological position, we can hold to it. And from a sensible position, what difference does it make? Because the practice that leads to purity of mind, and that purity of mind having a revealing capacity within it, where does it lead us? Does it lead us progressively onward? Does it inhibit us? How do we see it? And how is it that people can purify the mind and get their revelation in different parts of the world who are not associated with this theological position? And you might say, well, it's just a divine grace. Well, so be it. But divine grace happens when we make a movement. When we remove the blockage, the divine grace flows through. When we set the sail, the wind takes it. When we make an opening, then grace flows through. And so all we have to do is make that opening and increase the size of the opening until there's a totality standing there. Nothing more to do or say. And at each opening, we find, oh, it's a progression. And commensurate with that, our desires, which are selfish-based, are all diminishing. And then we know we have made the progress. So we'll leave it there, okay? Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Swami.
Okay, all right. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you,
Ramagat Swami.
Yes.
Swami.